This story is titled, I Lost My Phone at a Concert. The person who found it has been living my life better than I ever did. I never considered myself particularly successful or put together. At 25, I was living in a small apartment in Nashville, working as a barista at an indie coffee shop, and barely making ends meet. My name is Olivia, and up until 3 months ago, my life was a perfectly average blend of quarter-life crisis and iced oat milk lattes. My best friend Emma, 24F, worked with me at the coffee shop. She was everything I wasn't: organized, ambitious, and always planning her next move. Then, there was my roommate Josh, 26M, a perpetually optimistic musician who played at local bars and somehow always managed to pay his share of the rent despite never seeming to have a steady income. We made an odd trio, but it worked. My life had fallen into a comfortable routine. Wake up, make coffee for strangers, come home, watch Netflix, repeat. The highlight of my week was usually Friday game night with Emma and Josh, where we'd order cheap pizza and play board games while complaining about customers and failed relationships. I dated occasionally, but nothing ever stuck. My last relationship with Tyler, 27M, ended 6 months ago when he decided to move to Seattle for a job opportunity. I didn't fight for him to stay. That's the kind of person I was. Passive, accepting, always going with the flow. The one thing I did have going for me was my social media presence. Not that I was an influencer or anything, but I had carefully curated my Instagram to show the best versions of my life. The perfect latte art I made, the sunsets from my apartment's tiny balcony, the aesthetically pleasing corners of Nashville that made my life seem more glamorous than it was. It wasn't much, but it was something that made me feel like I had some control over how the world saw me. Looking back now, I realized I was sleepwalking through my own life. It took losing my identity to someone who knew exactly what to do with it to wake me up. But I'm getting ahead of myself. This story really begins on a warm September evening when Emma convinced me to splurge on tickets to see our favorite indie band, the Paper Kites, at the Ryman Auditorium. Little did I know that night would set in motion a chain of events that would force me to finally take control of my own narrative. The concert was everything we hoped it would be. Emma and I had managed to get spots near the front, close enough to see the sweat on the lead singer's forehead as he crooned into the microphone. The historic venue was packed, the wooden pews vibrating with the energy of hundreds of bodies swaying to the music. For those 2 hours, I felt truly alive, my usual anxieties drowned out by the haunting melodies and the collective energy of the crowd. It was during the encore when everything changed. As the band launched into their final song, the entire audience surged forward. In that moment of collective excitement, someone knocked into me from behind. I stumbled, my phone slipping from my back pocket where I had stupidly stored it. I felt it fall, but in the darkness and chaos, there was no way to safely look for it. Emma was lost in the music, her eyes closed, completely unaware of my growing panic. I tried to focus on the music, telling myself I'd find it when the lights came up. But when the house lights finally brightened and the crowd began to thin, my phone was nowhere to be found. Emma helped me search, crawling on hands and knees between the pews, but it was useless. We even stayed until the cleaning crew started their work, but my iPhone had vanished into the night. The venue staff took my information and promised to contact me if it turned up in lost and found, but I could tell from their expressions that they didn't hold much hope. That night, I lay in bed feeling strangely hollow. It wasn't just about losing an expensive piece of technology. That phone contained my entire life. My photos, my passwords, my banking apps, my social media accounts. Sure, I had cloud backups, but something felt deeply unsettling about my digital life being out there in unknown hands. Emma had helped me remotely log out of everything I could think of, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd lost more than just a phone that night. I tried to rationalize it. People lose phones all the time. I'd get a new one, restore my backup, and life would go on. But as I drifted off to sleep, a nagging voice in the back of my mind wondered if I'd done enough to protect myself. I had no idea then that someone out there was already scrolling through my memories, learning my patterns, and preparing to step into my life in ways I never could have imagined. The first signs that something was off came about a week after the concert. I had already replaced my phone and was slowly rebuilding my digital life, though I still felt strangely disconnected from everything. Emma noticed I was quieter during our shifts together, but I brushed off her concern by blaming it on the hassle of setting up my new device. Then came the Instagram notifications. My coworker Madison, 22F, mentioned during our morning shift that she loved my new photos from East Nashville, particularly the ones of me at Basement East seeing some up-and-coming band. I froze mid-pour, nearly ruining a customer's latte. I hadn't posted anything new since losing my phone, and I definitely hadn't been to any concerts. When I checked my profile later, my stomach dropped. There were indeed new posts, beautifully composed shots of someone at various Nashville hotspots, but the face was always just out of frame or obscured. The caption sounded exactly like something I would write, complete with my usual mix of self-deprecating humor and song lyrics. The posts were getting more likes than I had ever received. Comments flooded in about how my photography had improved and how my life seemed more exciting lately. Even Josh mentioned over breakfast that he was glad to see me getting out more, though he did think it was weird he hadn't seen me around the apartment as much. I didn't know how to tell him that I had been home every single night that week. My unease grew when I started getting texts from acquaintances about running into me at places I'd never been. Ashley, 25F, a regular at the coffee shop, swore she saw me at a poetry reading at Parnassus Books, talking enthusiastically about contemporary literature. Michael, 28M, a guy I'd gone on 2 dates with months ago, said he spotted me at a rock climbing gym in Sylvan Park, looking like a total pro on the wall. The problem was, I had never been to a poetry reading in my life, and the only climbing I did was the stairs to my third-floor apartment. What disturbed me most was how this mystery person seemed to be living a better version of my life. They were doing all the things I'd always said I wanted to do, but never had the courage to try. They were being the person I'd always imagined I could be, but was too afraid to become. And the worst part? Everyone seemed to prefer this new, more adventurous version of me. It was Emma who finally voiced what I had been too scared to acknowledge. During our closing shift, she gently suggested that maybe someone was using my old phone to impersonate me. Not just to steal my identity in the traditional sense, but to literally step into my life and live it, only they were doing it better than I ever had. The situation reached a breaking point when my mom called me in tears. She was overjoyed about my big news. Apparently, I had just landed a job as a social media manager at one of Nashville's top record labels. The position I had dreamed about but never had the confidence to apply for. According to the lengthy Instagram post my impersonator had made, I had been secretly interviewing for weeks and had finally gotten the offer. The post even tagged the company and several employees, who had congratulated me in the comments. My heart raced as I scrolled through the post. The caption detailed how I had built up my portfolio over the past few months, networked at industry events, and finally gathered the courage to pursue my dreams. It was an inspiring story of personal growth and determination, except none of it was true. I was still making lattes and avoiding eye contact with customers who asked for complicated orders. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed scrolling through my social media, trying to piece together who this person could be. They had been careful never to show their face clearly, but they matched my height and build from what I could tell in photos. They even seemed to have similar wavy brown hair to mine. The posts were now getting hundreds of likes, far more than I had ever received. Local influencers were following my account, and several Nashville-based brands had reached out about potential collaborations. I noticed they had been frequenting a particular coffee shop across town, Willow's Cup in East Nashville. From the geotags and check-ins, they seemed to stop there almost every morning around 8 a.m. The photos showed artistic shots of elaborate coffee drinks, often paired with notebooks and laptops, suggesting they spent considerable time there. It was exactly the kind of place I'd always wanted to visit, but had never gotten around to. Something in me snapped. I was tired of watching someone else live out my dreams, while I remained stuck in my comfort zone. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 2 years. Emma covered for me without question. She had seen how this situation was affecting me. I threw on my best outfit, the one I usually save for special occasions, and headed to Willow's Cup. It was time to confront the person who had not only stolen my identity, but had somehow managed to improve upon it. Willow's Cup was exactly the kind of place that would intimidate the old me. The interior was all exposed brick and hanging plants, with carefully arranged vintage furniture, and a clientele that looked like they had just stepped out of a lifestyle magazine. My hands were shaking as I ordered an oat milk latte, trying to look casual while scanning the room. I almost missed her at first. She was sitting in a sun-drenched corner by a large window, typing away on a MacBook covered in artistic stickers. My heart stopped when I realized I recognized the laptop sleeve. It was the same one I had been eyeing online for months but never bought, thinking it was too expensive. She had my wavy brown hair, styled the way I always wished I could style mine. She was wearing a vintage band t-shirt paired with high-waisted jeans and boots, essentially my dream aesthetic that I never quite managed to pull off. As I watched her from behind my coffee cup, something strange happened. Rather than feeling angry, I felt fascinated. She moved with a confidence I had never possessed, occasionally stopping to chat with other regulars who clearly knew her as Olivia. She took photos of her coffee with practiced ease, the kind of shots that would definitely end up on my Instagram later. Everything about her seemed like an upgraded version of me. A barista walked over to her table, bringing her a second drink she hadn't ordered. I overheard him say it was from the cute guy at the counter, a tall, bearded man in a denim jacket who looked like he could be in a band. The kind of guy who would never have noticed me. She thanked the barista with a warm smile and caught the guy's eye, giving him a small wave. He grinned and raised his own cup in response. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. This wasn't just someone pretending to be me online. She was living as me in the real world, building connections, taking chances, and making the kind of life I had always been too afraid to pursue. She was showing me exactly what my life could be if I just had the courage to step out of my comfort zone. I sat there for nearly 2 hours, watching her work, interact, and exist as a better version of myself. She eventually packed up her things, leaving with a confident stride that made several heads turn. I remained frozen in my seat, my coffee long cold, as a plan began to form in my mind. If this stranger could become a better Olivia overnight, what was stopping me from doing the same? That evening, I did something I'd never done before. I called in my resignation at the coffee shop. Emma was working when I called, and I could hear the shock in her voice. We'd been talking about quitting our dead-end jobs for years, but I had always been too scared to make the first move. Now, inspired by my mysterious doppelganger, I was finally taking action. I spent the next week transforming myself. I used my savings to buy the clothes I'd always wanted but thought I couldn't pull off. I practiced styling my hair the way she had done it, watching countless YouTube tutorials until my arms ached from holding the curling iron. I even reached out to some of the contacts who had commented on my recent Instagram posts, explaining that I had lost access to my old account but wanted to maintain those connections. The most daring move came when I actually applied to several social media positions, including one at the record label my impersonator had claimed I was joining. To my surprise, the hiring manager responded to my email within hours. They were confused. They had been expecting me to start work the following Monday based on my acceptance of their offer. Apparently, someone using my name and credentials had gone through multiple rounds of interviews and had impressed them enough to land the job. I should have been angry. I should have exposed the fraud right then and there. But something stopped me. Instead, I asked the hiring manager if I could come in to discuss the situation in person. I spent the entire night preparing a portfolio of my actual work, including my personal social media growth statistics and sample content strategies I'd been too afraid to show anyone before. The next morning, I walked into the record label's office wearing my new clothes, my hair styled with the confidence I'd learned from watching my impersonator. In that moment, I felt like I was playing a role, but wasn't that exactly what she had been doing? The only difference was that she had believed in her ability to play the part. The meeting lasted 2 hours. I was honest about the situation, explaining that while someone had impersonated me to get the position, everything they had seen in the interviews reflected capabilities I actually possessed but had been too insecure to showcase. Rather than being angry, the hiring manager was intrigued. She said she had never encountered a situation quite like this, but she was impressed by my honesty and the initiative I showed in coming forward. To my astonishment, they offered me a different position in the company, one that actually paid better than the original role. The hiring manager said my unique situation demonstrated creativity and adaptability, qualities they valued more than traditional experience. I would start as a digital content strategist the following week, with the opportunity to build my own team within 6 months. Riding this wave of confidence, I decided to return to Willow's Cup the next morning. This time, I wasn't there to spy or hide behind my coffee cup. I walked in wearing a vintage Fleetwood Mac t-shirt and my new high-waisted jeans, my hair styled in the loose waves I had finally mastered. As if on cue, she was there in her usual corner spot. I walked directly to her table, my heart pounding but my steps steady. She looked up as I approached, and for the first time, I saw her face clearly. She was around my age, maybe a year or two older, with features that could pass for mine in the right light and angle. She didn't seem surprised to see me. Instead, she calmly closed her laptop and gestured to the empty chair across from her. Up close, I noticed small differences between us. Her eyes were hazel instead of my brown, her nose slightly more upturned, her freckles more pronounced. But it wasn't the physical similarities that had allowed her to become me, it was the confidence, the certainty in her movements, the way she held herself. She had simply inhabited the best version of who I could be, and the world had believed her because she believed in herself. For a long moment, we just looked at each other. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out my old phone, placing it on the table between us. The screen was cracked now, a spider web of fractures across the surface that hadn't been there when I lost it. It seemed like a fitting metaphor for how my old life had been shattered and reassembled into something new. She introduced herself as Rachel, 26F. She spoke softly but directly, explaining how she had found my phone that night at the concert. She had intended to turn it in, but something about my Instagram feed caught her attention. She saw someone living on the edges of a life they clearly wanted but were afraid to fully embrace. My captions were filled with dreams thinly disguised as jokes, desires masked as self-deprecation, and a palpable longing for something more. Rachel admitted she had recently moved to Nashville after leaving her own stagnant life in Minneapolis behind. She had made the leap I had been too afraid to make, but found herself struggling to build a new life in a new city. When she found my phone, she saw an opportunity not to steal my life, but to show me what it could be. She had never intended to keep the job or maintain any of the connections she had made as me. Instead, she had been meticulously documenting everything: the networking events she attended, the people she met, the opportunities she uncovered. She showed me pages of notes on her laptop, every conversation, every contact, every door she had opened in my name. What struck me most was her explanation of how she had landed the job at the record label. She hadn't faked any credentials or exaggerated my experience. Instead, she had simply presented my existing skills and experience with absolute confidence, without the self-doubt and minimization I had always cloaked them in. She showed me the portfolio she had created using only my actual work, but presented with a conviction I had never been able to muster. The coffee shop had gotten busier around us, the morning rush creating a buzz of activity that felt distant from our intense conversation. The guy in the denim jacket, Tom, 29M, she told me was back at his usual spot by the counter. He had asked her out last week, she admitted, but she had turned him down, knowing she wouldn't be Olivia much longer. As we finished our coffee, Rachel handed me a small notebook along with my old phone. Inside were detailed notes about every person she had met while being me, every opportunity she had discovered, and every place she had found that she thought I would love. It was like receiving a guidebook to my own potential. She even included Tom's Instagram handle, with a small note saying he seemed like he was looking for the real Olivia, not just her confident alter ego. In a strange way, losing my phone had given me something I never expected: a blueprint for the life I had always wanted but been too afraid to pursue. Rachel hadn't stolen my identity. She had excavated it, unearthing the confidence that had been buried beneath years of self-doubt. That was 3 months ago. Rachel and I still meet for coffee occasionally, now at a new spot downtown that neither of us had been to before. She's building her own life in Nashville, working as a social media consultant under her real name. We laugh about how our strange encounter probably broke several laws, but ended up breaking something more important: my self-imposed limitations. I did end up getting coffee with Tom, this time as myself. He was surprised to learn the truth, but more intrigued than angry. We're taking things slow, getting to know each other for real this time. The record label job is challenging but exciting, and I'm actually doing better in the role than my impersonator had in the interviews. Turns out I had all the necessary skills, I just needed someone to show me how to believe in them. Emma still teases me about how it took someone stealing my identity to make me find myself. Josh claims he knew all along that something was off because the other Olivia never laughed at his terrible music puns the way I do. My Instagram followers have dropped a bit since I took back control of my account, but the engagement is more genuine now. I still post my coffee shots and sunset photos, but now they're accompanied by honest captions about growth, change, and the strange way life sometimes forces you to become the person you were meant to be. Sometimes when I pass the Ryman Auditorium, I think about that night at the concert. About how losing my phone felt like the end of the world, but turned out to be the beginning of a better one. I've learned that sometimes the best version of yourself exists outside your comfort zone, waiting for you to gather the courage to become it. And sometimes, strangely enough, it takes seeing someone else living your life to realize you're the one best suited to live it after all.